As we all know, when we suffer with high anxiety responses, anxiety can strike at any time for absolutely no reason. Except, of course, it can't. Anxiety isn't something that happens, it's something our mind does. And our mind doesn't do anything without a reason. But if that's the case, then why does it feel like we sometimes experience random, unexplained anxiety? And more importantly, what can we do to stop that? I'm Timbox, and this is why we feel anxiety for seemingly no reason. So welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time, I'm Timbox. I'm a mind coach, and for the last 12 years or so, I've been working with people to help them overcome all sorts of emotional and psychological issues, and in particular, helping people to get control of anxiety. Before we go any further, please leave a like on this video, and why not subscribe for mind coaching and anxiety advice videos every week. Now, there's no doubt that one of the worst things about experiencing high levels of anxiety are those times when it seems to strike out of nowhere. As human beings, we like to feel in control of our own happiness as much as possible, and when unpleasant feelings seemingly materialize for no apparent reason, then it can make us feel the exact opposite, like we are completely out of control. This is why we'll so often find ourselves talking about feeling anxious about anxiety, because we're very much perceiving it to be our biggest fear that can strike at any time. It's our perceived vulnerability to anxiety or panic that exacerbates the problem. But one of the biggest steps we can take towards coming out the other side of an anxiety issue is to recognize that anxiety doesn't strike for no reason. In fact, if we can work out what it is we're actually anxious about in those seemingly random and inexplicable moments of anxiety, then we can take a huge step towards restoring the control we're currently lacking. When our anxiety has reached a point where we're now experiencing it for apparently no reason, then we might decide to reach out for help, in which case we very quickly get given a reason, that reason being that we have an anxiety disorder, which gives us a name for what we're experiencing but effectively stops us in our tracks as far as our search for answers goes. The answer becomes, hey, it happens. You feel anxious because your anxiety response is broken. This is why we can very often find ourselves welcoming a diagnosis of a disorder, because at least it fills in that blank in our mind as to the cause of the problem. However, being told that the reason for our anxiety is pathological is actually worse than no reason at all. It simply tells us that not only are we out of control, but we will always be that way. We did nothing to cause this and therefore can do nothing to stop it. It potentially reinforces our perceived vulnerability to anxiety striking at any moment. The good news is that even those of us that might be more predisposed to a high anxiety response than others, after all, we've all been through our own unique journey when it comes to the events in our life that forge the building blocks of our emotional responses, in truth, we won't ever feel anxious without something to feel anxious about. We won't trigger a threat response without a perceived reason to feel threatened. I very often have clients tell me they frequently feel anxious for no reason, or certainly aren't aware of any reason they can put their finger on. It just happens randomly. However, in most instances, in the next breath, they'll then tell me exactly what they feel anxious about. Maybe a certain situation is too reminiscent of a bad experience in the past. Maybe the way they're currently feeling has become associated with a previous anxiety response. It turns out they did know, they just rejected it as a possible cause because they didn't regard it as a good enough reason to create the level of anxiety they're feeling. However, the mistake would be to then dismiss that reason as invalid. I recently had a client tell me they went into work on a Monday and felt fine all day, had a great day, only to go in on Tuesday and have anxiety strike out of nowhere. They then spent the whole day fighting the physical feelings of anxiety, trying to suppress the fear of it flaring up and out of control. When I asked what was different about the 2 days, they at first told me nothing, but then when I asked them to think about it a little more, they mentioned that on Tuesday morning they were tired from a late night. It turns out their first experience of a panic attack had been when they were feeling tired, and something in their subconscious had stored the idea of tiredness, potentially leaving them vulnerable to panic. What very often presents as no reason is in fact simply either a reason currently outside of our conscious awareness, or a reason we're aware of but had kind of dismissed. We know the origins, we just dismiss it because we don't agree with the response. But when it comes down to it, no matter what the underlying trigger for anxiety might be, we're all feeling those high levels of anxiety for the same simple reason. We fear feeling anxious. In the example given, the reason the client had felt anxious for the whole day at work was because the slight flicker of anxiety about being a little tired had been flagged up in their mind as an indicator that they were having an anxious day. It wasn't the fear of being tired that caused the anxiety to persist, it was the fear of any anxiety getting out of control that actually caused it to stick around longer than it otherwise would have. This is why when a client tells me they're feeling anxious for no reason, the actual reason is nearly always that they've become anxious about anxiety. When we experience physical sensations that we associate with anxiety but can't pin on any specific situation in our life we should feel anxious about, this then causes us to attribute the way we feel to some maladaptive anxiety response, and that lights the fire of anxiety about anxiety. This in turn then takes the way we're feeling to the next more unpleasant level. We feel out of control and we feel anxious about that. You might be saying, well, okay, I understand that when I experience feelings of anxiety, it's my anxiety about these feelings that causes it to spiral out of control. But if I'm getting those physical anxiety symptoms when there's initially nothing to feel anxious about, then surely that means it can strike for no reason. Well, there's actually a really good reason why we feel strange physical sensations on a regular basis. There's actually nothing to do with anxiety. That's what our body does. Every day, from moment to moment, our body is doing hundreds of things to regulate our normal functions. Our heart rate shifts, our breathing changes speed and depth, our stomach gurgles and churns, our muscles tense and relax. A lot of the time this happens mostly outside of our conscious awareness, although occasionally we'll notice one or more of these things happening, or any number of other sensations. When we have no anxiety issue, then we barely pay a moment of attention and probably don't remember it happening from one occasion to the next. However, when we have a perceived anxiety issue, we've started to subconsciously monitor our physical sensations a little more closely. We've started to notice these shifts a lot more because now in our mind they represent a potential threat, and threat demands our attention. Threat creates anxiety. We notice our heart skipping a beat and speeding up, and now we feel anxious because we associate our heart racing with our previous panic attack or anxiety episode. We then feel heightened anxiety about it. After all, there's no obvious reason why I should feel anxious or panic right now, and yet my heart is racing. Is this my anxiety flaring up again? This is why the rhetoric of anxiety striking for no reason simply fools us into interpreting normal human physical shifts as signs of disorder. The bottom line here is that there is always a reason why we feel anxious. Sometimes triggers outside of our conscious awareness, and sometimes just a natural physical shift. But the truth is that anxiety isn't something that happens, it's something our mind does, and our mind always does things for a reason. Being aware of that reason can be helpful. After all, it can let us know that no matter how disordered we feel our responses have become, we can rest assured that they're never entirely irrational. Our mind isn't broken or malfunctioning, it's just making mistakes now and again. But always understanding why we feel anxious in any given situation isn't entirely necessary to the process of changing it. The real underlying reason for feeling anxious is usually because we're human beings, and human beings get concerned about all sorts of things. Some are justified and others not so much. If we can accept there's nothing wrong with that, then we can stop monitoring our responses so closely and avoid creating further anxiety. It's worth reminding ourselves at times that feeling anxious can't hurt us. It's not a sign of illness, and it always passes when we no longer feel under threat. I really hope this video has been of value. If you have any questions, then put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer all of them. Please hit that thumbs up button if you like what I do, and why not subscribe to the channel for weekly mind management tips and anxiety advice. But that's it for now. I'm Timbox, Mind Coach. Always remember to be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.